Subscribe, click the like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss another unforgettable story. The dining room smelled like roasted chicken and candle wax. Plates clinked softly, laughter bouncing off the walls. I sat across from my sister, Sarah, watching her grin as she carved into the turkey. It was just another Sunday dinner, or so I thought. I had spent all morning helping Mom in the kitchen, arranging the flowers just right, making sure the mashed potatoes were creamy enough. Everything seemed perfect. The sunlight streamed through the curtains, catching the gold flecks in the tablecloth. Seconds before everything changed, I could hear the quiet hum of family chatter, the soft scrape of silverware. Life felt ordinary, safe, and warm. Then she said it. "You'll never be the bright one," Sarah said, laughing in that way that made everyone else pause. It was meant to be a joke, I knew that, but the words hit me like ice. Time slowed for a moment. The laughter around me blurred into a single, piercing sound. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. I stared at her. She wasn't smiling anymore, just leaning back, confident, smug. The room was suddenly too small, too bright. Mom and Dad were still talking, oblivious. My little brother was laughing at something on his phone. But my world had tilted. "You'll never be the bright one," she repeated, this time softer, almost a whisper that carried through the room. My chest tightened, my hands shook. For years I had worked to prove myself, to show I was capable, to earn even a fraction of the respect I craved. And here it was, so casually thrown aside, as if I were invisible. I wanted to cry. I wanted to yell. I wanted to disappear. Instead, I swallowed hard and forced a smile. "Maybe," I said quietly, "but you'll see." The words felt hollow, even to me, but inside, something shifted. Sarah laughed again, not noticing the storm behind my eyes. Everyone returned to their conversation, laughter, clinking glasses, and I sat there, pretending it didn't hurt. But it did. Every word she had ever said to belittle me, every glance that ignored my efforts, crystallized in that one sentence. I thought of all the times I had tried and failed silently, all the times I had been overlooked, dismissed, or laughed at. And yet, this moment felt different. This was public. The betrayal wasn't hidden. It wasn't a quiet comment behind closed doors. It was in front of everyone. And somehow it stung deeper because of that. The dessert was brought out. Apple pie, cinnamon rising like a gentle cloud. But I didn't taste it. I watched Sarah, her hands brushing the crumbs from the table, completely unaware of the tempest she had stirred. The room was warm, bright, full of chatter. But I felt the cold hollow of a plan beginning to form. I remembered a conversation from a week ago, a casual chat with my aunt in the garden. She had said something simple. "The truth always comes out. Give it time." I had smiled politely, not realizing how prophetic her words would become. Now I understood. It wasn't about proving her wrong in the moment. It was about waiting, watching, preparing. I looked down at my plate, at the half-eaten mashed potatoes. I wanted to shove it all away, to run out of the room and slam the door. But instead I took a deep breath. I focused on the quiet determination building in my chest. There was something I could do. Something that wouldn't be loud or dramatic, but inevitable. I stood slowly, catching Sarah's eye. She smirked. "Going somewhere?" she asked. I didn't answer. I walked toward the kitchen, past Mom and Dad, past the laughter that no longer mattered. The moment I closed the door behind me, the sound of the dining room felt distant, almost unreal. And I made a promise to myself. It wasn't about revenge in the usual sense. It wasn't about making her look foolish or trying to humiliate her. It was about showing her, and everyone else, that I could rise. Quietly, steadily, without anyone realizing until it was too late. I leaned against the counter, breathing in the faint smell of cinnamon and roasting meat. Outside the window, the garden was bright, untouched by the tension inside. I clenched my fists, not in anger, but resolute. Whatever happened next, I told myself, I would be ready. And when the time came, the truth would speak louder than any words she had thrown at me. Because in that moment, at that ordinary Sunday dinner that had felt safe and warm just seconds before, something inside me had changed, something that no laughter could erase. And as I wiped my hands on a towel, I whispered to no one, not even myself, "You'll see." The sound of Sarah's laughter floated in from the dining room, sharp and light, but this time, it felt different. It felt like the beginning of a story that was just starting, and I was the author. The kitchen smelled faintly of soap and roasted vegetables as I leaned against the counter, the words my sister had said still echoing in my head. I closed my eyes, letting my thoughts drift to a time when things had been different, when family dinners felt like warmth, not a minefield of judgment. I remembered my 12th birthday, years ago. The dining room had been decorated with balloons and streamers, a cake at the center of the table. I had been so excited, beaming with pride as I showed everyone the drawing I had made for Mom. "Look, I did this all by myself," I had said, voice trembling with hope. Sarah had leaned over, examining the paper. "It's okay," she said casually, barely looking, "but I think I could make it better." I had laughed nervously, trying to hide my hurt. "Maybe, but I like it." Mom had smiled, encouraging, but I remembered that tiny flicker in her eyes, almost regret, almost worry. I had brushed it off, focusing on the birthday candles, the gifts, the fleeting happiness. At the time, I had thought Sarah's words were just teasing, innocent sibling rivalry. But looking back, I could see the start of a pattern, her way of making me feel small without anyone noticing. Another memory surfaced, the science fair in middle school. I had worked for weeks on my project, building a model of the solar system with careful attention to detail. When the day came, I had stood proudly next to my display, waiting for praise. "You don't even know what half of this does," Sarah had said, leaning casually against the wall. Her friends laughed, and I felt the sting immediately. Mom and Dad had murmured something supportive, but their eyes shifted quickly to other things, leaving me exposed. I had wanted to disappear then, too, but I had smiled, forcing myself to explain the project. I didn't cry in front of them, but the memory of her words had etched themselves deep into my heart. Over the years, those small cuts, ignored efforts, snide remarks, the laughter at my expense had built into a quiet ache, a slow, gnawing awareness that I was always second, always overlooked. I shook my head, trying to push it away, but it kept coming. The time I had wanted to learn piano, I had begged Mom for lessons, saved up allowance for months. When I performed my first recital, my hands trembling on the keys, I had looked at Sarah for support. Instead, she clapped politely, then muttered, "Not bad for someone who started yesterday." The words had been like a shadow over every accomplishment since. And suddenly, that Sunday dinner, the laughter, the words, the public dismissal was no longer an isolated incident. It was the culmination of years of being subtly undermined. I wandered into the living room, passing the worn sofa where I used to curl up with a book, and stopped at the family photo wall. There we are, all smiles and pictures that seemed frozen in happiness. My mind replayed conversations that had once felt casual, but now rang differently. "Don't bother, you'll never manage it. Why even try? You're not really cut out for this. It's okay, some of us are just naturally better." Every phrase, every laugh, every glance that seemed accidental now felt deliberate, a quiet choreography that had placed me in the background of my own life. And then I remembered something I had long forgotten, a drawer in Mom's study, always locked when I was a child. I had tried to peek once, curious, innocent, and Mom had caught me. "It's nothing you need to worry about," she said, shutting the drawer sharply. At the time, I had accepted it, respecting boundaries. But now, something about the locked drawer nagged at me. Maybe it had always held answers.
Curiosity clawed at me. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I quietly went to Mom's study. The drawer was slightly ajar, as if inviting me to look. My fingers trembled as I pulled it open, and inside, neatly stacked, were letters, old notes, and small journals. The first letter I picked up was addressed to my parents from a family friend. I read quietly, the words twisting in my stomach. She's incredibly bright. She just needs someone to notice, to support her. She's often overlooked because Sarah has always been more confident, louder, more assertive. Please, don't let her potential go unnoticed. I stared at the words, the realization settling like a slow dawn. All these years, I had been dismissed, undervalued, not because I wasn't capable, but because no one had truly seen me, not even those who loved me. My sister's words that day at dinner were not just cruelty. They were the echo of a truth no one had dared to acknowledge. But yet, for the first time, I felt a spark of clarity. The betrayal, the laughter, the quiet undermining, it wasn't the end. It was a challenge, something I could meet, something I could rise above. I carefully closed the drawer, clutching the letters to my chest. Outside, the house was silent, the moonlight spilling across the garden. A new thought began to take shape. Maybe the story wasn't about proving anyone wrong in the moment. Maybe it was about building a life that could not be ignored, a life that spoke louder than any words. And as I looked out the window, I whispered to myself, quieter this time, more certain. Now I know. The past had been revealed, and with it, the path forward. Something was waiting for me, something I hadn't yet seen, and I was ready to find it.
The next morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, painting the floor with stripes of gold. I made coffee quietly, the hum of the machine filling the space where yesterday's laughter had cut so sharply. The letters from Mom's drawer were tucked safely in my bag. I didn't need to rush. This wasn't about sudden action. It was about careful steps, quiet strategy. I sat at the table, stirring my coffee slowly, thinking about all the small moments I had brushed off, every casual dismissal, every laugh, every "you'll never be" comment. Each one had been a seed of doubt planted in my mind, but now I saw them differently. They were not chains, they were lessons. Each word, each glance, was a map showing me where to build strength. At school, at work, everywhere I went, I started noticing things I had ignored before. Opportunities for growth, skills I could refine, friendships I could nurture. I began small, staying late at the library, learning new ways to approach tasks, listening more carefully to others. Every achievement, however minor, felt like a brick laid in the foundation of the person I was becoming. Sarah, of course, didn't notice at first. She continued her casual confidence, laughing at jokes, charming everyone. But I stayed calm, observing, learning her rhythms. I wasn't trying to outshine her in public. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I focused on myself, quietly building competence and confidence that no one could ignore for long. I found strength in subtle victories. A teacher complimented my essay. A friend relied on me for advice. I noticed the shift in how people responded to me, not loudly, not dramatically, but in those small, meaningful ways that made the world bend a little more in my favor. One evening, I came across a community project that needed volunteers to organize a charity event. My hands itched to join. I proposed an idea, carefully thought out, and presented it to the group. Sarah happened to be there too, chatting with friends, her usual charm on display. I felt a pang of that old resentment, but I let it sit quietly. Instead, I focused on the plan, explaining it clearly,
answering questions patiently, showing competence without boasting. By the end of the meeting, several members came up to me. "This is a great idea. Can you help lead this?" they asked. My heart lifted, not because I wanted recognition, but because finally someone was seeing what I had to offer. Sarah's eyes flickered toward me for a moment. I noticed a tiny pause, a subtle change in her expression, as if she felt the air shifting. That night, at home, I lay awake thinking about it. I realized revenge didn't need to be dramatic or cruel. It was in balance, in letting truth reveal itself through action, not confrontation, in letting competence and integrity speak louder than insults. I had power now, not over her, but over my own life. Weeks passed. Every small success, every kind word from someone I helped, every moment I quietly proved myself, built a rhythm I had never felt before. Sarah's smiles occasionally faltered when she glanced at me, though she never said anything. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I noticed. That tiny flicker was all I needed to know that things were beginning to shift. One evening, while organizing documents for the charity event, I stumbled upon an old folder of our family achievements. Photos, awards, letters of recognition. I opened it, and among the neat stacks, I found something that made my breath catch. A note in Mom's handwriting, tucked between old certificates. It read, "She has always had the potential to shine. Don't let anyone make her doubt it." It wasn't just encouragement, it was validation. Everything I had felt, every quiet frustration, every overlooked talent was recognized by someone who had loved me deeply. I held the note in my hands, feeling a surge of clarity and purpose. That's when I realized Sarah could sense it too, not in words, but in the pauses, in the subtle shift in her gaze, the hesitation in her laughter. She was beginning to notice that I was different now, stronger, calmer, unshakable. The balance I sought was approaching, quietly, inexorably. And for the first time, I allowed myself a small, confident smile. This was only the beginning. Soon, the truth would be undeniable, and she would see, not because I made her, but because my life would speak for itself. I stood, letting the folder rest on the desk. Outside the window, the sun glinted off the trees, casting long shadows. A story that had started in pain was now growing toward clarity. The pieces were falling into place, and somewhere, I knew, Sarah was starting to notice the change.
The next Sunday, dinner felt different. I walked into the room with quiet confidence, carrying a plate of roasted vegetables. Sarah glanced up, smirking as if expecting me to be timid or distracted. But I wasn't. I felt calm, steady, grounded in the truth I had been building for weeks. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "You've been different lately," she said, curiosity threading her tone. I placed the plate down carefully, making eye contact. I have been noticing things I didn't before, noticing what matters. Her brow furrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said, choosing my words slowly, "that I've realized something important about myself, about how I've been seen, or not seen, for a long time." Sarah's eyes narrowed, a hint of tension appearing where there had only been playful confidence before. She was listening. I could feel it in the stillness of the room, in the quiet attention of Mom and Dad. "I know what you said the other night, about me never being the bright one. My voice was calm, even, but every syllable carried weight. And for a moment, it hurt. But then I remembered things from the past. All those times I tried, all the small victories you dismissed, all the moments I was overlooked." She shifted uncomfortably. I didn't mean it like that," she said quickly,
Her tone wasn't defensive, it was the first flicker of doubt I had seen. "It doesn't matter how you meant it," I said softly. "The truth is, I've been capable all along. I just didn't always see it clearly for myself. But I do now." Her laugh, nervous and low, was nothing like the confident chuckle from before. "You really have changed," she murmured, almost to herself. "Yes," I said, letting the word hang in the air. "I've worked on myself. I've learned patience, focus, and what I'm capable of when I really try. And it's not about proving you wrong. It's about being seen, by myself, by everyone else. And you're part of that story." She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with her fork. A wave of regret crossed her features, subtle but undeniable. I didn't realize," she said. Her tone was quieter now, tinged with guilt. "I understand, but it did. And that's why this matters. Not revenge, not humiliation, just recognition, balance, understanding." The room was still. Mom and Dad exchanged glances, their eyes softening, sensing the shift. My little brother, who had been scrolling on his phone, looked up, sensing the weight in the air. "I guess I underestimated you," Sarah admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Her pride, which had always been unshakable, was giving way to something softer, realization. I nodded. "It's okay, you can't always see what someone is building quietly, but it's never too late to notice." She finally lifted her gaze to mine, eyes glistening slightly. "I see you now," she said. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. This confrontation wasn't about anger or punishment. It was about awakening. The atmosphere in the room shifted. The tension wasn't bitter anymore. It was transformative. Sarah's posture relaxed, the mask of confidence replaced with something genuine. She seemed smaller, yet closer, like a wall had fallen between us. I felt a calm satisfaction, not pride or triumph, but peace. My strength wasn't loud. It wasn't about shouting or dramatic gestures. It was about being steady, being visible, and letting truth have its natural impact. "Thank you," she said softly, almost as if surprised by her own words, "for showing me." I smiled gently. "It was never about showing you. It was about living my truth. But I'm glad you see it now." And in that quiet, unremarkable dining room, the shift was complete. A subtle, powerful understanding had emerged. Sarah's smirk was gone, replaced with reflection. I had not destroyed her, but we both had been changed. The story had turned. The scales of silence and doubt were now balanced by truth and recognition. For the first time in years, I felt the room breathe differently, as if every glance, every sound, every laugh carried a new weight. And deep inside, I knew this moment would resonate far beyond this dinner, leaving a mark on both of us, and on the story we were still learning to write together.
After the quiet confrontation at dinner, the air in the house felt different. Not lighter. There was still tension, but sharper, as if a layer of misunderstanding had finally been exposed. I found Sarah in the living room the next morning, sitting cross-legged on the sofa, staring at an old photo album. She didn't look up when I entered. "I've been thinking," she said finally, voice low, "about what I said, about everything." I sat beside her, keeping my distance, giving space for the words to come. "Go on," I said softly. She took a deep breath. "I've always been afraid," she admitted. "Afraid that no matter how much attention I got, people would notice someone else instead. You. I thought if I stayed loud, confident, first in line, no one would see you as brighter than me. I didn't know I was hurting you so much." Her confession hit me harder than the original insult. It wasn't cruelty. It was fear, disguised as pride, layered over insecurity. The betrayal hadn't been about me at all. It had been about her struggle to be seen, her way of coping with the world. "I never realized," she whispered. "I thought I was protecting myself, but I ended up overshadowing you." I paused. My own anger, the sting of years of dismissal, rose briefly, but then I felt it settle into something clearer. Empathy. I saw her fear, her vulnerability, and I remembered all the small ways I had grown, all the subtle victories I had quietly built. It hurt, I said, not just the words, but the pattern, the feeling that no one noticed me, that my efforts didn't matter. I know, she said, her eyes wet, and I'm sorry. I didn't see it. I didn't see you. There was a long silence. Outside, the garden glowed in late afternoon light. The hum of distant cars and bird song filled the quiet. The weight between us was no longer tension. It was understanding. Fragile, but present. Then I noticed a folded piece of paper tucked between the album pages. I pulled it out. It was a note, written years ago by Sarah herself, though in a rush, almost hidden. I wish someone would notice her. She works so hard. But if I ever slip behind her shadow, what will happen to me? I held it in my hands, reading the words over and over. My chest swelled with a mix of sorrow and clarity. The betrayal had never been malicious. It had been fear, distorted and misplaced. Her words weren't meant to wound. They were a reflection of her own struggle. I looked up at her. I understand now, I said quietly. It wasn't about me being less. It was about you being scared. Her shoulders slumped, relief mingling with shame. I didn't mean for it to feel like betrayal. I thought I was doing what I had to do. We sat there, side by side, the silence holding the truth between us. I realized that the moral choice wasn't revenge. It wasn't even proving her wrong. It was something subtler, something stronger. Forgiveness. But forgiveness felt heavy, layered with recognition. It wasn't easy. It wasn't simple. I turned the note over in my hands, thinking of every moment that had hurt, every time I had felt unseen. And then I considered the possibilities, letting the past fade quietly, building my future without bitterness, showing her through action rather than words, allowing the truth to reshape how we moved forward. Sarah's eyes met mine, tentative but searching. "So, what happens now?" she asked. I didn't answer immediately. I felt the weight of choice pressing down, a calm, steady pressure that demanded thought. I could forgive, I could guide, I could let the world see both of us in a new light. Or I could hold on to a quiet edge, letting her realize fully what she had done. But the right path, the one that felt moral and true, wasn't obvious yet. The afternoon light fell across the living room, catching the corners of the photo album, the note, and our shared silence. Time seemed to slow. Every heartbeat echoed with possibility. Finally, I whispered, almost to myself, "I have to think about it carefully." Sarah nodded, eyes glistening. "I understand. I'll wait." And there we were, two people who had hurt each other unknowingly, standing on the edge of understanding, forgiveness, and change. The choice hung in the air, heavy but full of potential. Neither of us spoke, yet the weight of the moment said everything. Outside, the garden shimmered with golden light, untouched by the quiet storm inside. And in that stillness, I knew the next step would define everything, not just for Sarah, but for me.
The sunlight fell gently across the kitchen table, painting the room in soft gold. I sat there quietly, the note from Sarah's old journal resting in my hands. The choice I had been weighing, the path between lingering resentment and true understanding, had finally settled. I could feel it in my chest, a calm certainty that hadn't been there before. Sarah entered slowly, carrying a small cup of tea. She set it in front of me, without a word, her eyes meeting mine with a tentative honesty. I nodded, a small smile forming, acknowledging the gesture. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a victory shouted across a crowded room. It was quiet, intimate, and full of meaning. "I've been thinking," she said softly, "about everything I said, everything I did. I want to make it right." I reached for her hand, but stopped halfway, letting the silence carry its own weight. "It's already changing," I replied. "Just recognizing it is enough for now." She nodded, letting a gentle tear slide down her cheek. "I never realized how much my words mattered." "I understand now," I said, my voice calm. "And I forgive you, not because it erases the past, but because it allows the future to be different, stronger, clearer." The room felt lighter, not because the past was gone, but because it had been acknowledged. The betrayal, the small wounds, the years of being overlooked, they had shaped me, yes, but they didn't define me anymore. I could see my own worth, and Sarah could see it too. I glanced at the old photo album, still open on the table. A picture of us as kids laughing at something only we understood caught my eye. I picked it up and handed it to her. "Look at this," I said. "This is who we were, and it's also who we can still be, together but wiser." She traced the edges of the photo with her fingers, a faint smile appearing. "I remember this day," she whispered. "We were so happy, so simple." "Yes, and that simplicity is still here. It just needs to be seen differently." We sat together for a while, the sounds of the house soft around us. No one else was rushing to notice the change. It didn't matter. The moment was ours, filled with reflection, understanding, and unspoken promises. Later, I found myself writing a small note and leaving it on the kitchen counter, a gesture both symbolic and poetic. It read, "To the future. We are capable, seen, and enough. Let us remember the past only to guide us forward." I didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't need to. It was a quiet record of growth, a reminder that truth and patience could speak louder than any argument or insult. That evening, the family gathered again, laughter and conversation filling the room. This time, the words felt lighter, more balanced. Sarah caught my eye across the table, a small nod passing between us. No teasing, no doubt, just recognition. I realized then that revenge, in its quietest form, didn't have to be about punishment or proving someone wrong. It could be about living fully, honestly, and allowing truth to shine naturally. My own life had become my statement. My growth, my calm confidence, my subtle victories, they all spoke more clearly than any confrontation ever could. The day drew to a close. Outside, the sky glowed with soft hues of pink and gold. I stepped onto the porch, feeling the cool breeze against my skin. The house behind me hummed quietly, filled with voices, now attuned to understanding and reflection. I held the folded note in my hand, letting the words settle into the quiet evening. The past, with all its pain and misunderstanding, felt like a shadow that no longer clung to me. Instead, it was a guide, a gentle hand pointing toward who I could become. And as the last light faded into twilight, I whispered softly to the night, "We are seen. We are enough. And we rise." The words lingered in the air, slow and deliberate, carrying peace, balance, and the quiet triumph of truth.